If these two Boston College football players play like they did during spring camp, they're going to have an immediate impact on BC and help them win games come this fall.
You are Locked On Boston College, your daily podcast on the Boston College Eagles. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome. This is Locked On Boston College, your team every day. I'm your host, AJ Black. I have been the host of the show for 5 years. I'm also the publisher of Eagle Insider. I've been covering for BC for over 10 years. If you're looking for inside information, you are in the right place. Today's episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Make every moment more with Monarch Money. Take control of your finances and use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. Now, let's get into today some changes in ACC basketball scheduling. Does it honestly matter to BC? We'll talk about what those changes could look like and how it could impact the Eagles. We're also going to look at, with the portal closed, players can still get picked and they can sign, but has BC done enough in the transfer portal, both in the winter and now, to get themselves ready to try to win 8 games or more? And to kick things off, let's look at 2 players that I think have started to really see their ascent within the Boston College football organization. Now, I'm going to give you an offense. I'm going to give you a defense. Let's start with the defense. All right. The first player that I saw his stock rise was Quintavious Hutchins. Now, you may be saying to yourself, hey, Jay, we all knew who Quintavious Hutchins was last year. He was the guy that lined up opposite, Donovan Azaraku. And I'd say you were correct. But I'd also say, going into next season, he needs to play a bigger role. Azaraku's in the NFL now. He's with the Cowboys. You need him. You need the guy. And what I saw from Quintavious Hutchins, who has really done a great job of progressing his play from, a special teamer to solid defender last year to what I think he could turn into this year, is the guy on your defense. Will he be Donovan Azaraku? I don't think he'll get to that point, but will he be better than what we saw 2 years ago? Sure. I think you have that guy. Now, you don't need him. You would obviously love for him to get 16 and a half sacks, but what I saw at camp, I'll give you an example. The last scrimmage, the last weekend of camp, there was a series of plays where Quintavious Hutchins was out there that he played, as I can only best describe, like his hair was on fire. He was everywhere, running back, trying to get, tackle the runner, chasing the quarterback. He was having such an energy on that field that I couldn't help but notice how important he's going to be. So I think his stock rose. I don't expect Quintavious Hutchins to be a complimentary player next year. If he does, you're going to have to either find a bunch of other complimentary players that can help, solidify this, or you're going to be in trouble. I think he's going to be better than that. I see a much more confident, much more matured defensive edge. And I think that's exactly what you need. He's going to fill the role that Azaraku had on the field, and he's going to play that role of a leader in the locker room, and that is important. Having a guy that can do what Cam Arnold did last year, what Donovan Azaraku, what Cam Horsley did, those older guys that can hold the fort down. You lost George Rooks. You now need someone who can do it. Quintavious Hutchins, Q, is that guy. The second player is going to cause some controversy because I think there's 2 camps right now in the BC fan world. There's the fans that really stuck with Grayson James and are steadfast that he should be the starter day one. And then there are those, maybe 3 camps. There are those that think, hey, I heard Dylan Lonergan's good. Let's play him instead. And then there's those that see that they're both really competing at camp and that there is a real quarterback battle. So my second player is Dylan Lonergan. And I want to bring him up again because I want to give you context of where my brain goes when from what I saw when they landed him to now. you have all, I mean, if you're a subscriber to 247, I hope you guys are, you see that there's 4 stars out there. 4 stars do not equal success. It just doesn't. There's a higher likelihood that they'll be successful, but you can get quarterbacks and players that just flame out. Look at what happened with Jaden Rashada. Jaden Rashada is what, on like his 15 now. He was the #1 quarterback, I believe, in his class, and he's playing at Sacramento State this year. And there's no guarantee he'll be successful there either. I saw Dylan Lonergan. He did not do much at Alabama. I was a little bit skeptical. I didn't know what he could bring. He could come here and not do much, and Grayson James would be fine. When he started playing, when I saw how he controls an offense, he opened my eyes. And I want to say this again, because some of you Grayson James fans out there will attack me. I am not saying Dylan Lonergan has earned the starting job. I am not saying Grayson James has earned the starting job. It's still a battle. And both men have done an excellent job during camp, okay? But I'm saying what I saw out of Dylan Lonergan really did live up to that 4-star billing. Like, he looked like the blue chip recruit, the guy that can really run your offense that Bill O'Brien brought in, the guy that Nick Saban said was the best quarterback in his room. There's a reason they brought him in, and he has been successful. Watching him with that offense, you really get to see why he, and I feel bad for you all because they didn't have camp this year. I mean, they didn't have the spring game, so you didn't get to see what he looks like. Because I think if you saw what Dylan Lonergan can do, you'd be impressed. Shaker Rising is another one, but that's for another story. Lonergan is quick. He's not Thomas Castellanos with his feet, but he's also, he's not Emmett Moorhead, who's, not the fastest guy in the world. He's quick. He can get out of pressure, which is great. So that, like, when plays were breaking down, Lonergan just took off. James can do that too. So I'm not saying that either of these guys have an edge up on that, but I was very impressed with that. The piece that really impressed me with Lonergan was his throws. Good decisions. He found his guys. He rarely was making tons of mistakes. He'd make a mistake here or there, but that's part of practice, right? You're learning, you're figuring things out. But I never watched him during a practice and said, oh, Dylan Lonergan doesn't look like he belongs. He'd make a mistake here, but then he'd respond with some great passes. Working with BJ Wilkins, or even, a Lewis Bond or Reed Harris, like, they connected. And obviously he's connected very much so with Ty Lockwood, the other transfer who was his roommate at Alabama. So Lonergan exit camp with his Sky Rock. I would say the staff probably said, AJ, we saw this all along. This is from my perspective. I saw him as a guy that I expected Grayson James to really dominate in camp. And what I saw from Lonergan was a guy that could actually really throw the football. And, you have him for 3 years. He's exciting. He's going to play at some point. And when you get him out there, he's going to run an offense that is what Bill O'Brien wants to do. So Dylan Lonergan's my second one. Now, I came up with 8 other players up on Eagle Insider today. It's under VIP wall. You can sign up and check it out. But I have 8 players on special teams. I bet you can guess what I put there. Defense, offense, it's all there. So come over to Eagle Insider and check out what I had to write. Now, I want to also, before we go to our, the next piece, talk about all you everydayers out there. The people out there that know that Locked On Boston College is free wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube, and have made us your first listen every single day. You guys are our MVPs. You're the Locked On BC MVPs. And I want you guys to give yourselves a round of applause. And thank you for making us your first listen every single day. In our second segment, let's talk about the portal. With BC landing a couple right now, and they're still busy, has Bill O'Brien done enough to make BC competitive for the 2025 season? We'll talk all about that in just a moment. Ever check out your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in. Your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app, guys. It's a complete financial command center. You could track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place, so you stop managing your money and start building wealth. When I started using Monarch, I realized how much I was eating out and how expensive that was, and also how many streaming services I had. It really helped me get control of that. My wife loves it. I think you'll love it too. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LockedOnCollege at monarchmoney.com for $50 off, 50%, for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LockedOnCollege for half off your first year. This is Locked On Boston College. I'm your host, AJ Black, and I wanted to let you guys know. Many of you have heard of the Locked On Squad show, and you know that you've never seen me on it. This Thursday, I make my grand debut. I'm on there talking about Bill Belichick. You want to hear my thoughts on him? The transfer portal and how it impacted BC, and something we're going to talk about in just a little bit. But check out Locked On ACC on YouTube where we get podcasts. I think you'll like it. If you like me, it's a good episode to check out. It'll be on our feed too, so I hope you guys listen to that as well. So the transfer portal is officially closed, and that's for undergraduates. You could still see graduate students enter after it closed. I'm not sure if he put his name in before, but like Bryce Steele, for instance, he was a graduate student. He was allowed to leave after the portal closes because they have that portal open. So for the most part, though, I think the team that you have now, with a few minor tweaks and a few other spots that maybe they're going to grab a transfer here or there, I think this is the BC team you have, which begs the question. Did Bill O'Brien improve this team enough to make them on track to win 8 games next year? My answer is yes. If you look up and down this roster, what positions Boston College needed to address and what kind of players they needed to get, I think Bill O'Brien did an excellent job of hitting all those. You have the under-the-radar recruits. VJ Wilkins out of Campbell. I'm going to guess that most of you, maybe even if you live in the Northeast, don't have any clue where Campbell is. But watching this kid at camp, you got something. You have a star in the making right there. This is not Jaden McGowan like last year, who struggled and didn't really make much of an impact. VJ Wilkins is going to play. You get guys like him. You get other under-the-radar guys. Favor Bate, for instance. This is a guy that no one was talking about, and I saw him at camp a bunch too. You go for the bigger names. As we mentioned before, Dylan Lonergan and Ty Lockwood out of Alabama. I have to say, after camp, the first portal was closed, I was a little worried that Bill O'Brien's only transfers that he landed were either FCS guys or guys that he's recruited before. Lockwood and Lonergan and a bunch of guys from schools you never heard of. I was like, is this going to work? But a credit to Bill, I'm wondering where his brain went to after camp ended, because you look at the players that they have recruited. They've landed 2. Jason Hewlett from Michigan, a linebacker, and Chris Maribel, a defensive tackle from Wake Forest. So power programs. Good. I like that. I like that you've started to kind of mix that back up. And he's not done going for the FCS guys. I think there's something to be said. That they've got the guy coming in, the linebacker from Barton, who is checking out BC. I don't mind that because he was freshman defensive player of the year. He showed he can play at that level. He can play at this level. You fill the roster. I feel like they did that. Now, if you were to ask me what position am I least confident that they address appropriately, I have to say it'd probably be the edge rusher position. I still think that that's a position that I'm concerned about going into next year. And I kind of wished, they went more than just Favor Bate and Anya Nuisi, 2 guys from, FCS schools. Bate, I really do think he's going to be something, but I think you need someone more established and who can step in immediately. And I'm not sure either of those guys are going to be that guy, but they could. Who knows? I think that's one. I also wonder if they're done there. I've seen, them showing some interest and through the portal and some other edge rushers. So there's potential that they could get another, transfer at that position. If you want a name, I have it up on the board. That's one position that I'm like, I don't know if Bill did enough, because if you lose Donovan Ezeraku and then you go to Quintavious Hutchins and then Jason Flint, maybe the new transfers. I'm not sure where your next starter is going to be. I like Jason Flint. I think he's played well, but is he enough? Is there enough on this defense? The other piece I want to talk about was I've been impressed, especially in the spring portal, with how he's addressed gaps going into the summer. The linebacker position, one position I have not talked about because, I've talked about, but I'm not diving into it because it's just not worth it. They went through the almost entire spring camp with Paulo Fayoe, Griffin Collins, and then a bunch of walk-ons and Von Pemberton, a transfer running back turned to linebacker. Yes, Davion Crouch is coming back. Yes, Owen McGowan is coming back. Yes, Kamori Dixon is coming back. But he goes out, he adds another preferred walk-on from a D3 school. That kid, I don't have his name in front of me, but he's a preferred walk-on. They added him. They added Jason Hewlett. Love that. Jason Hewlett, as we said with Mitch on the other show, should be competing with Owen McGowan for snaps. And that's good. You need somebody out, like iron sharpens iron, folks. That's my motto here at Locked On BC. You need guys that can compete, that can help you get better. You can't just go in there and just assume Owen McGowan's going to be enough. He could be, but you also want some other guys out there, especially because he's been hurt. So I like that he's done that. I like what he also did with the kicking room. Your kickers are fine. Your punters is more what I'm getting at. You brought in Andy Quinn, my favorite freshman from Ireland, but you're not just resting on him or Sam Stone, the other punter. You brought in Seamus Florio, and I think he's going to play an important role with this special teams unit because my expectation is that the ball comes off of Andy Quinn's foot like nothing I've seen out of BC in a couple of years. He booms kicks. That being said, it's always indoors. It always hits the rafters. So I have no clue how far his punts are going. Florio, I can tell because he's not a booming kicker. He's going to play a role that you didn't have last year, which is more of a situational punter. Last year, you were just lucky that you could get a punt off. Like we were watching those going, oh my God, he's going to get hit. He's going to punt it out of bounds. Seamus Florio is not going to kick it 50 yards. But if you have the ball at the 50-yard line, he could pin that, do a nice directional kick for you. And that was a piece that BC was missing. And I thought Bill O'Brien did an awesome job of bringing that in. So I'm pretty happy so far. I still think there's a few pieces that they could add on. I mentioned edge rusher, maybe another defender here or there. But I feel like they're in a good spot. And I really think as well, it's worth mentioning. I was just on Locked On ACC. They asked me, who is the biggest loss on BC in the portal? And I have no idea what the answer is. George Rooks, I guess. But really, they haven't lost anything that wasn't like you could replace them. Like George Rooks, fine player, has been around a long time, but there's plenty of guys on your roster that can do what he can do. And not a knock on Bryce Steele, but you have, Jason Hewlett or some of these other guys that they're bringing in. They could probably do what he did too. And I'm not knocking him because he has other things that obviously were bigger than football. But I think this is important. In the age of NIL, in the age of the transfer portal, when I post stuff on Facebook all the time for 247. And whenever anyone leaves, it's the first thing everyone's going, oh my gosh, the ship, it's sinking. Everyone's leaving. This is ruining college football. Take a breath. Look at who they lost. Most of them were not playing a role next year. You're filling them back with other guys that could develop. That's what you need to do. Like, Jacoby Robinson was not going to play a role for this team in the immediate future. You let him go and you use that scholarship to find somebody else that could. And that's not a bad thing. NIL has not devastated BC football like other teams have. NIL, Bill O'Brien has built a culture at Boston College of accountability and community here with his teammates. And I think that is what really prevented, a mass exodus of guys that you were just relying on. Why Lewis Bond is still here and Reed Harris is still here. And, Grayson James is still here because they respect this whole community. They are taken care of NIL wise. Maybe they're not the richest guys in the world, but they're still getting taken care of, and they're doing what they need to do. So I think this is a solid portal class for Bill O'Brien, and for an interesting one to watch, because I think last spring he didn't do anything. I don't think he added anybody. Cameron Martinez came in. He basically had to keep him from going back in the portal because I think Cameron was so gung-ho about going with Halfley that I think he just had to resell it to him. That's what the impression I got. Well, in our final segment, ACC basketball is about to make a change to the schedule. For some teams, this is a big deal. Is it for BC? I'll tell you what I mean about that in just a moment. This is Locked On Boston College. I am your host, AJ Black. And when you are done this episode, I want to tell you about Locked On Patriots. If you're a New England fan, they have an excellent podcast. Check out the Locked On Patriots on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. Now, this is your team every day here at Locked On BC. I know you guys are enjoying this. I was just looking at it. We've done 1,000+ episodes of just Boston College talk. I'm a sicko just like you guys. That's what I keep hearing. And I want to tell you that ACC is looking at changing their scheduling to mirror more what the SEC is doing, which is to reduce the amount of conference games from 20 to 18. Now, this is all based on this net rating and, why the ACC is not getting teams in while the SEC seemed like half the conference or more than half the conference got in last year. For Boston College, you know what? It doesn't really matter. BC just needs to win. I don't care if they're playing 20 conference games or 6. If you got rid of, I think what you'll see get gone is the preferred rivalries. You'll either have a rivalry against Notre Dame or a rivalry against Syracuse. If we get Notre Dame, that would be great because BC plays better against Notre Dame than they do Syracuse. But you get that off. You put in 2 games. What I imagine BC would do is not schedule fun teams that you would love to see, like Georgetown or Providence. I don't see that happening. They're going to do what the SEC does, which is just schedule cupcakes in hopes of beating the snot out of them, and that would help them. Now, the SEC does this very, very well. You see teams like Auburn and Florida and Georgia. All these teams just beat the snot out of every lower division team that they play. For the ACC, it isn't like that. And for BC, it's critical mass bad. You play all these bad teams. You beat Stonehill by what? 4-3? Stonehill. I don't know. You lose to Dartmouth. You barely win all your games. For the net rating to help BC, they need to pummel teams. And I honestly can't remember the last time I've seen BC really beat the brakes off of a bad team. They win by 10 or 15, and that does not help. But again, I go back to my thesis on this. It all doesn't matter. Because if BC takes those 2 games and they schedule UMass Lowell and, Boston University and loses one of those games, now you have 2 potential new by-game losses. The epitome of brutality, as John Rothstein says. And that ain't good. So go to 20, go to 16. It doesn't matter for BC. You have to win games. And BC has not consistently won games in over 20 years. You have to get back on that winning streak. Playing ACC games is harder, but BC doesn't beat at lower teams either. So honestly, just start winning. And we'll have to see what happens there. On tomorrow's show, I want to talk about drafts again. Which players on BC's team could we see being drafted next year? We have a recruit that we're waiting to hear who he is. I know who he is. But when is he going to commit? There's been clues. We'll talk about him. There's a lot going on, and I want you to make sure that you subscribe to Locked On BC on YouTube where you get podcasts. We're completely free, so make sure you do that. And I'll see you again tomorrow for another episode of Locked On Boston College, your team every day.